Hey, welcome to the video, everyone. This is going to be the first official video for the channel, and with it, I kind of wanted to discuss Path of Exile from a newer player's perspective. Not just someone who is brand new to the game, but someone who is might have leveled in the past before, but never really reached the map system or the endgame systems, and kind of see like what my experience was like and what you can expect if you want to dive in and kind of get into the nitty-gritty of Path of Exile. Yeah, so growing up, I loved Diablo 1. We had a family computer, we got the disc. You actually had to have the disc for Diablo 1 to play that game back in the day. There was no Battle.net where you just launched everything directly from Battle.net. You actually had to have the disc and launch it from there. And me and my friends, we played that game non-stop, man. We played that game so much that the disc itself, it just ran itself dry in that PC. It eventually broke inside of the CD-ROM holder, and it shattered into a bunch of pieces, and we had to get a new one. There were a lot of games over the years that scratched the Diablo itch, but never anything like Path of Exile, where it just did all the systems just so well. The difficulty was there, the loot was there, the character progression was there. It just felt like the perfect marriage of ARPG mechanic. But I'd be lying if I didn't say it felt overwhelming. I felt like an insurmountable task of learning the game, getting into the game. It really felt like I had to play Path of Exile and only Path of Exile. But I'd come to learn that that's not the case at all. And while it does require some external learning to kind of get the grasp of all the systems in the game, it's not super demanding on your time. You can play it casually if you want, but the addictive nature of it does kind of come to odds with that. But yeah, no, I did think it was going to be a lot more time consuming than it actually ended up being. It does feel a bit more welcoming than something like Diablo Immortal does for the casual ARPG fan. Where that game is very taxing on your wallet. This one can be taxing on your time, but it doesn't require it. You can simply put in as much time as you want, but the more time you put in, the more you'll get out of it. So, going into Path of Exile this time, I came at it with more of an approach that I really, really wanted to experience the end game. I know that as a first-time leveler, that can be a daunting experience. I know that some of the professionals who play Path of Exile can do it in about 5 hours. And I did watch a guide to level up my class while I was playing, which might have hindered the experience a little bit. I'm not entirely sure. But, I made it. I didn't make it in the 5 hours the video said I was going to be able to do it. I think I did it in like 25 or something. But I really experienced what I wanted to experience from the leveling process. And I want to talk about how currency works in Path of Exile. It's very similar to something like Diablo 2, where Diablo 2 used runes. The reason runes were so popular is because if you put them in a certain order, it would form a word, and that word would give you a specific magic item. Some of those runes were so rare that they were so valuable, and you can trade specific items for them. That system did become kind of cumbersome because you would be looking for a 2-socket gray item your whole end game. In Path of Exile, every item in the game works towards crafting. So you'll be forging magic items, rare items, re-rolling items. Everything does something. The more rare or more insane the update is to the item, the rarer the currency is. So like if you use an exalted orb to change an item to a rare item, I believe, that's going to be worth the most because it's doing something drastic to one of the weapons. And you trade with players directly. There are websites called like PoE Ninja or PoE Trade. These websites all create a system where you can look at it like an auction house of sorts, see what people have up for auction, and then message them in game and trade currency for whatever they want. Like whatever they were asking for, you could trade it to them. This is where the game shines, in my opinion, is the community aspect of this, where you have to actually reach out to players. You go to their hideout, you see what they're doing, you see who they are. The interaction might not be long, it might just be a couple seconds, but it's an interaction nonetheless. The leveling experience in this game is rather solo. You really don't play with friends, and a lot of the experience is solo, so it is nice that this bartering system is there to make the community connected. and feel whole. That is one thing I hope that Path of Exile 2 improves on, is that the community aspect, because you don't see enough players. You see players in the towns, but not really out in the world. So I would really hope that Path of Exile 2 improves on that and moves forward that way. The endgame of Path of Exile, I'll have to be honest, it almost stopped me from playing initially. The map system, the mining, the heists, it all felt very overwhelming. And I understand that as a new player, I had to be expecting that. And you do have to look out to external resources to kind of understand what's going on with this. But I'm happy that I did stick to it, and I did kind of not listen to that little voice inside my head that said run away and stop, because this is too much, this is too complicated. Once I did kind of dive into that external material and figure out what was going on, I did really enjoy the game. But coming at it from a new player perspective, it really was a lot, and I can see why the majority of players, I would not say the majority of players, but a lot of players don't reach this point in the game. This does feel like where Path of Exile does begin, for the most part, but it is so complicated that it is almost a deterrent within its own right. It can be a video on its own to kind of discuss if a game is necessarily bad because it doesn't explain everything that it needs to for you to be successful, or if outside help like YouTube videos and guides are a good thing for the game as a whole. I would argue that in Path of Exile it is kind of a good thing, because the content there is so dense, and there is the help within the game itself through like tool tips and little guides built into the game. But the community does such a good job at explaining what needs to be done and how to do it, that it really doesn't feel like it's dragging the game down at all, that those systems aren't within the game itself. Would it be better if Path of Exile had a full-on tutorial for the end game once you reached it? Sure, it definitely would. Figuring out labyrinths and maps and all that can be very confusing, but interacting with the community is also a huge part about what makes Path of Exile special. So I almost wouldn't want to take that away, because it kind of adds this layer of flavor that is missing from a lot of games, because you could just play most games solo without having to interact with the community at all. And I think it is kind of a positive here to bring that into the light. I really hope other developers and other ARPG games are looking at Path of Exile and looking at what Path of Exile is doing throughout the leveling, throughout the end game, and throughout the currency system, because we're tired of just gold. We don't want another battle pass. We don't want any of this nonsense. We just want a good game. And you don't have to copy everything that Path of Exile is doing, but just look at the best things that Path of Exile is doing and maybe elaborate on those or expand on those. Path of Exile is a very special experience. It's an ARPG that we don't really get enough of these days. It doesn't hold your hand. It doesn't kind of force you to play in a way that the game wants you to play in. It just says, here are the tools, use them how you will. That could be a negative, as I said, because it does require the use of guides a lot of the time to reach those higher tiers of content near the end. But the build variety is there, and every season the game is changing, the developers are updating it, and it's getting bigger and bigger every year. We have Path of Exile 2 around the corner, which looks to be a free update to the main game itself here. So sometime in 2023, we're likely to see a big shift in the game, and it's going to drastically change the way we see Path of Exile. And honestly, that's going to be a huge earthquake to the gaming market, in my opinion. If they can do with Path of Exile 2 what they have done with Path of Exile 1, games like Diablo 4 don't stand a chance. And I really hope that those developers are looking at Path of Exile and what Path of Exile is doing and taking it seriously. Because just thinking about Lost Ark and Path of Exile alone, I can't think of what Diablo 4 is going to bring to the market that is going to change the gaming landscape dramatically. What they've shown isn't anything special, and it does seem to be haunted by the threat of microtransactions and cosmetic items on the shop. Path of Exile does have an item shop, but it's not really forced upon you at all. You do have to buy the stash eventually if you do want to dive into that end game content, because it does give you a huge quality of life improvement. But that's only after you've already thrown in like 60 to 70 hours into the core game and you know that you want to make it your own. Path of Exile is a free game, so if you are putting 70 hours into a game before you have to even interact with the item shop, that's a great thing. I do dislike that a lot of the cool armors and cosmetics are behind a paywall. I did feel like the cosmetics were a bit lacking in the cool factor, and anytime I did see someone with an insane armor set, it always ended up being a microtransaction set. I'll just end the video saying this: like, if you're looking for an ARPG, you're looking for a game like Diablo. You remember Diablo back in the day, or Diablo 2. Diablo 3 isn't quite doing it, and Diablo Immortal is just a mess all around. Don't even touch Diablo Immortal. Come to Path of Exile, play Path of Exile, and maybe the first time you play, you get to 25. That's fine. You put it away for a while. You come back next season. You get to 30, 35, and you just get better every time, and you just kind of like absorb the information slowly. You don't always have to reach the highest tier of map to enjoy the game. You can take your pace. You can just each season just learn a little bit more, move a little bit further forward, and eventually the game will kind of come together. And I tell you, there's nothing like it on the market right now, and it's definitely worth it. I stream probably 3 to 4 days a week. I'm looking to stream on YouTube primarily, but I do have a Twitch channel. I'm going to look into multi-streaming, but I think I want to grow this YouTube channel the most. So keep an eye here if you're looking for content from me. Definitely subscribe to the channel below, like the video. It definitely helps out. And yeah, hope to see you slaying in Path of Exile. See ya.